Sen. Rand Paul didn't expect his line of questioning to open a window into the deepest structural flaws inside DHS, yet the moment he pressed Secretary Kristi Noem, the cracks began to show. It started quietly, almost casually, like a routine budget oversight exchange. But within seconds the tone shifted because Paul wasn't just challenging a number, he was challenging an entire system that couldn't justify what it demanded. The first 30 seconds of his reaction revealed the difference between a disagreement and a revelation, and in that time it became obvious that Noem could not explain what her own department was asking for.
Secretary knows, everybody knows, that's the end. We're going to try to move on to the next person to get you out of here. We talked a little bit about the wall earlier. The administration has asked for $46.5 billion for the wall. The border on the Mexican border is about 1,950 miles. We've fenced or walled about 700 of it. That leaves about 1,200 miles. There's 200 or 300 miles of it that probably never going to have a fence on. It's mountainous or just impossible to fence or wall. So I would say realistically, you got under 1,000. But let's just say there's 1,000. You really want to wall on 1,000. CBP says it's 6.5 million per mile. Your response today was 12 million per mile. That means $12 billion for 1,000 miles. We're off here by a factor of 3 or 4 with 46 billion. Where's the rest of the 46 billion? The administration says they want 46 billion for a wall. You could pave all of it and still have, 34 billion left over. What's the 34 billion going for?
Yeah, Senator, thank you for the question. We do have 702 miles of wall today. 598 of that are steel. The rest of that is temporary, that's in place. Since the president's been in office, over 70 miles has been erected. We have 11 contracts that have gone out and allocated. We also have 5 more that are pending. Based on the dollars that have been requested, it's not just the infrastructure that would be built, that would be the actual wall construction. It would be also surveillance equipment.
The number's way off. 1,000. You could do 1,000 miles for 12 billion. You're asking for 46 billion. So I'm one who's not impressed and would have to see more detail as to where the rest of the money goes. We can't just throw $30 billion out there and say things cost a lot.
I agree. We'll get you the specifics on that.
With regard to the drones and all the preparatory work that DHS does and the government does for the NFL and for FIFA, does the NFL pay DHS for the work you do?
Boy, not to my knowledge. I will.
Well, I mean, here's my point. The NFL makes billions of dollars. We're $2 trillion in the hole. I don't care if government shares their technology and government helps out the World Cup. They ought to pay.
Yeah,
People are paying hundreds of dollars for tickets. I mean, thousands of dollars for the NFL, for Super Bowl and things. They're also paying for FIFA. And so these people ought to pay. And so I'm one holding up these authorizations, and I'll let them go forward. But I want people to pay. I mean, it's ridiculous that the average taxpayer who could never afford to go to an NFL Super Bowl has got to pay for their security. Should the government help? If we have technology they don't, perhaps. But they ought to pay. So NFL, FIFA, I think they all ought to pay. And we'll be insisting on trying to put language in that. If you're a for-profit entity and the government's helping you, you ought to pay for it. With regard to TSA Quiet Skies and Tulsi Gabbard situation, I suspect there are going to be other people that were caught up in this thing as well. I'm horrified by the idea that we took a former congresswoman and we're surveilling her and riding on jets with her. There was another story of an air marshal whose wife, might have been at January 6th or something, and now we're, have air marshals following another air marshal or his wife. So I want to hear the whole story of what happened. I want to hear that people have been let go, that they're no longer doing this. If there were abuses of Tulsi Gabbard's liberties, I want to hear from that. But I want repercussions to come from this. And I think you've said something's coming. Please let us know, and let us know how the program the destruction of civil liberties can be minimized. I frankly probably have trouble with the whole program, but let's see if there's some way. But we need significant reform. If it needs legislation, please come to us with that. Thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Secretary Noem, for being here.
That moment didn't just expose confusion, it exposed chaos. Paul began with a simple calculation, the kind that doesn't require specialized knowledge or inside briefings. The southern border is roughly 1,950 miles, 700 of those miles are already fenced or walled, that leaves around 1,200 miles. But of those 1,200, 200 to 300 are nearly impossible to build on due to mountains, terrain, or other physical barriers. So even if you push the upper boundary, you have about 1,000 miles of feasible construction. At $6.5 million per mile, the total cost would land around $6.5 billion. Even using Noem's inflated figure of $12 million per mile, the maximum is roughly $12 billion. Yet DHS asked for $46.5 billion. Paul's question was direct: where is the other $30+ billion going? Noem responded with rehearsed talking points: how many miles are steel, how many are temporary, how many contracts have been issued, how many are pending. But none of this answered the core question. Contracts don't equal costs, and details about mileage don't justify tripling or quadrupling a budget request. The moment she finished, Paul repeated his point without raising his voice. The number simply did not make sense, and that is where the silence spoke the loudest. Noem could not reconcile the discrepancy. She could not point to specific projects, operational needs, technology investments, or administrative costs that accounted for the tens of billions floating untethered in the budget. Instead, she promised to get the specifics, a promise that would be reassuring if it didn't confirm that the specifics were missing in the first place. But Paul didn't stay in the weeds of construction math. He shifted, strategically, to a broader issue that most Americans rarely think about: the federal government's role in securing massive sports and entertainment events. He asked whether DHS gets paid by the NFL or FIFA for providing advanced technology, surveillance support, and other security resources during events like the Super Bowl or the World Cup. The NFL generates billions in revenue. FIFA earns billions from broadcasting rights, sponsorships, and licensing. Ticket prices for major games reach hundreds or thousands of dollars. Yet taxpayers, ordinary people who may never attend a single game, fund the federal support these corporations rely on. Noem's answer was vague. She didn't seem aware of whether DHS received compensation. She could not articulate what agreements existed, or whether DHS had ever requested reimbursement. Paul made his point with clarity: taxpayers who cannot afford to attend these events should not be subsidizing them. If DHS provides specialized expertise or equipment, these billion-dollar companies should pay for it. This wasn't a partisan stance, it was a basic question of fairness. Why does DHS insist it needs more money while providing free services to immensely wealthy private organizations? The hearing turned again when Paul addressed something far more disturbing than money: the Quiet Skies program. For many viewers, the existence of this program is unsettling enough. It tracks individuals based on patterns, behaviors, or loosely defined criteria, sometimes without informing the people being monitored or giving them a chance to contest the classification. Paul highlighted reports that former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard had been surveilled by air marshals. Other reports described an air marshal's spouse being followed, possibly due to indirect association with events surrounding January 6. These allegations painted a picture of a program with unclear boundaries and even less oversight. Paul expressed deep concern and demanded transparency, consequences, and reform. If the program targeted people without solid justification, accountability was necessary. If federal authorities followed individuals without cause, structural changes were required. Noem responded with general statements about repercussions, though she never clarified whether those repercussions were aimed at individuals who abused authority or at whistleblowers who exposed the practice. The lack of clarity made the issue even more troubling. The American public expects federal agencies to operate within legal and ethical limits, especially when monitoring citizens. When high-level officials cannot explain how a program is managed, who authorizes surveillance, or which safeguards exist, it raises questions far beyond one hearing. As the exchange unfolded, a broader pattern became undeniable. DHS appeared to be expanding its authority across domains: border security, corporate security, domestic surveillance, without clear boundaries or justification. Its budget swelled, its responsibilities drifted, and its explanations grew thinner. This isn't a small problem. It speaks to how modern national security institutions evolve when oversight is weak. A department can acquire new tasks, new budgets, and new powers with little public debate. And the larger it becomes, the harder it is to track how money is used or how decisions are made. Paul's questioning revealed how deeply improvisation has replaced strategy. DHS requested enormous funds without detailing specific needs. It provided services to billionaire corporations without clear reimbursement structures. It operated surveillance programs without transparent guardrails. Noem's inability to answer straightforward questions was not a simple misstep. It was evidence of a department functioning without coherent internal control. If leaders cannot explain how funds are allocated or how authority is exercised, they cannot assure the public that rights are protected or that resources are used effectively. The implications extend far beyond border policy. When federal agencies grow without accountability, democratic norms erode, budgets grow uncontrollably, programs expand beyond their original scope. Ordinary citizens become vulnerable to opaque systems they cannot understand or challenge. And once these systems are entrenched, rolling them back becomes almost impossible. Paul's questioning served as a reminder that oversight is not optional. It is the only mechanism preventing national security from overshadowing civil liberties. This hearing demonstrated why vigilance is necessary, not to obstruct legitimate security efforts, but to ensure that power remains tethered to public accountability. DHS's inability to justify its budget or clarify its practices may seem like bureaucratic disorganization, but disorganization at this scale has real consequences. Taxpayer money can be wasted, rights can be infringed, programs can drift into dangerous territory. And when leaders cannot answer simple questions, it suggests their departments cannot either. The exchange between Paul and Noem should spark deeper questions. How much money does DHS actually need to secure the border? How much does it spend on unrelated programs? How many people are monitored under domestic surveillance initiatives? Who oversees those decisions? Are financial incentives aligned with public interest, or do they enable unchecked expansion? These questions matter because the answers shape the balance between liberty and security in everyday life. When agencies lose focus, priorities become distorted. Border funding balloons while transparency evaporates. Federal resources flow to private corporations while citizens pay the bill. Domestic monitoring increases while oversight decreases. These shifts happen slowly, often unnoticed, until hearings like this reveal how far they have gone. Paul's reaction wasn't dramatic, it was methodical. And that methodical approach exposed more in minutes than many hearings reveal in hours. He highlighted inconsistencies, contradictions, and gaps that should alarm anyone who values accountable governance. What he revealed is not a failure of one secretary, but a systemic issue. DHS is becoming too large, too unfocused, and too unaccountable. And when leadership cannot answer basic questions, reform is not just necessary, it is urgent. As the hearing concluded, the lingering impression was not of conflict, but of unanswered questions. Noem's promises to provide details later did not resolve the central concerns. The budget discrepancies remained unexplained, the corporate subsidies remained unjustified, the surveillance program remained opaque, and Americans watching were left with a clearer understanding of how easily government agencies can drift from their intended purpose. This is why it is essential to examine these hearings closely. They reveal the decisions, assumptions, and patterns shaping national policy behind the scenes, and they show how scrutiny, even from unexpected voices, can expose truths that would otherwise remain hidden. The issues raised during Paul's questioning will not disappear until addressed directly, and the public deserves answers that are specific, transparent, and accountable. Until then, these concerns will continue to grow, because unanswered questions in government rarely stay small. The broader significance of this exchange becomes even clearer when considering how DHS has historically framed its mission. Created in the aftermath of national crisis, it was designed to coordinate security, streamline communication, and prevent future threats. Over time, however, the mission expanded in ways that often outpaced congressional oversight. Technology programs grew in complexity, border initiatives multiplied, and surveillance tools became increasingly sophisticated. Yet transparency did not grow at the same rate. What Paul uncovered is not simply a budgeting issue, it is the culmination of years of expanding authority without proportional accountability. This makes the financial discrepancy more alarming. $30 billion is not a rounding error, it is not a minor overestimate or a justifiable buffer. It is an amount large enough to reshape entire agencies, build massive infrastructure, or fund countless programs. The fact that DHS could not articulate where that money would go suggests one of two structural failures. Either the department has not properly allocated or detailed its plans, or it assumes Congress will approve funding without demanding clarity. Both possibilities are dangerous. A department that cannot justify its own requests risks wasting resources. A Congress that allows such requests risks enabling unchecked power. But the financial question is only one part of the puzzle. The Quiet Skies revelations highlight a cultural issue within DHS, an internal logic that prioritizes capability over constraint. Surveillance tools are powerful, and once available, agencies often seek to use them. Without strict limits, what begins as targeted monitoring can drift into generalized observation. Programs designed for rare situations become normalized, and when oversight lags behind technology, civil liberties suffer. Paul recognized this, and his demand for consequences signaled a need to re-establish boundaries. The allegations involving Tulsi Gabbard are especially striking because they demonstrate how easily such programs can be misapplied. A former member of Congress being monitored suggests that no individual is inherently protected from overreach. If reports claiming that other individuals, including family members of law enforcement officials, were monitored as well, it paints a disturbing picture. It suggests a system operating without clear criteria, one where individuals can be swept into surveillance nets based on association rather than evidence. Without reform, such programs could expand further, impacting more Americans without their knowledge. Corporate security assistance adds another layer to the problem. When DHS dedicates personnel, technology, and time to supporting profit-driven events, it diverts resources away from broader public needs. If the NFL and FIFA can generate billions, they can also afford their own security. DHS involvement may be justifiable when national security is at stake, but routine federal support for private events blurs the line between public duty and corporate privilege. Without transparency in these arrangements, taxpayers cannot know whether their money is being used appropriately. This raises a deeper philosophical question: what should DHS be responsible for? Border security, cybersecurity, disaster response, corporate event security, domestic surveillance. The department's expanding role suggests a lack of strategic definition. As responsibilities grow, so does the budget. As the budget grows, so does the temptation to accumulate more authority. This cycle becomes self-reinforcing unless checked by rigorous oversight. Paul's performance in the hearing was successful not because he delivered partisan attacks, but because he restored focus to these foundational questions. He asked what DHS was doing, why it was doing it, how it justified its actions, and whether it operated within the bounds of law and ethics. Noem's inability to provide details was not just a momentary lapse, it was evidence that the system itself lacks the clarity needed to answer such questions confidently. Considering these issues together, a picture emerges of a department experiencing mission drift, budget inflation, and inconsistent oversight. These dynamics threaten the balance between liberty and security that democratic systems rely on. When budgets expand without explanation, financial accountability weakens. When programs grow without scrutiny, civil liberties erode. When authority expands without constraint, democratic institutions suffer. Reform is possible, but only if hearings like this one lead to substantive changes. Congress must demand detailed budget justifications, require transparency in surveillance programs, and ensure that DHS focuses on its core mission rather than adopting responsibilities better suited for private entities. This may require revising statutory authorities, implementing new oversight mechanisms, or restructuring internal processes. Whatever steps are necessary, they will require political will and sustained attention. The American public also plays a role. Citizens must remain informed, engaged, and aware of how government agencies operate. Oversight is not solely the responsibility of elected officials, it is a collective duty shared by all who benefit from the protections democracy offers. When the public demands transparency, accountability becomes harder to ignore. When the public becomes complacent, secrecy thrives. This hearing serves as a reminder that even the most powerful agencies must justify their actions, even the largest budgets must be explained, even the most advanced surveillance tools must be governed, and even routine hearings can reveal truths that transform understanding.
The issues Paul raised are not abstract.
They affect taxpayers, travelers, workers, families, and communities. They shape how security is defined and how rights are protected. If you want more deep analysis that exposes what really happens in congressional hearing rooms and breaks down complex issues in a clear, accessible way, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who want to stay informed about the decisions shaping our future.